Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Global South-South Development Expo 2022, Thematic Solutions Forum, Accelerating the Learning Recovery and Transforming Education in Southeast Asia through Multi-Stakeholders Partnership. Today, we are lucky to have 5 panelists, and we will also be guided on the context of education in the region by none other than the Chief of Section for Inclusive Quality Education. Before that, I would like to remind everybody that this is really an important forum, and this is, I think, after the APRE-MC, or the Asia Pacific Regional Education Ministers Meeting. This is our first time to reconvene all the stakeholders as well. So we know the problem, and the problem is that the pandemic has really given us a lot of points to reflect on. We see a lot of inequities and we see a lot of challenges, but we should not forget all the solutions that we have developed over the 2-year pandemic. So many things have to be done, but today we're lucky. We have ASEAN Secretariat, we have SEAMEO Secretariat here, UNESCO and UNICEF, always leading and guiding the region, commitments, partnerships, and programs. And today we will also be listening to some of the successful programs we have in our region. We hope to listen to your suggestions or comments as well in this deliberation. To welcome us this afternoon and to expound further on the current context of education in the region, including our commitments and existing partnerships, may I call on Margaret Sack-Israel. Margaret has over 30 years of experience in education and international development. Before joining UNESCO, she was the UNICEF Regional Education Advisor for Latin America and Caribbean. And prior to that, she was also the Chief Program Coordinator for UNESCO Institute for Lifelong Learning and was the focal point for the development of UN Education 2030 agenda at UNESCO headquarters. In her present work and current capacity, she oversees the SDG for Education 2030, regional cooperation, coordination, policymaking, and planning from early childhood and basic ed, as well as other levels, including multilingual education, mother tongue-based education, and health and well-being. That's very important. She is also the co-chair of UN Networking Group Learning and Education 2030 Plus, where we are mostly members with UNICEF, East Asia Pacific Regional Office, and ROSA. So dear friends, ladies and gentlemen, let us warmly welcome Ms. Margaret. Margaret, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ethel, and welcome to all of you to this very important Thematic Solution Forum, which really looks at a very important topic. You've seen it on the screen and you mentioned it already. This is really about how to accelerate learning, recovery, and transforming education in Southeast Asia, but together, meaning through multi-sectoral partnerships. So what we're trying to do today is really to showcase, first of all, a selection of successful examples of South-South collaboration across the region, and then to discuss together how to collaboratively work with countries and support them in their efforts in ensuring learning recovery and transforming education post-COVID-19 through South-South collaboration and triangular cooperation, also in that way accelerating SDG 4 progress. So let me start by recalling where we are and recalling in particular the regional context of education in terms of looking at the impact of COVID-19, but importantly also referring to the pre-existing learning crisis. So as we know, the COVID-19 pandemic and the related school closures severely impacted on the one hand, equitable and quality education delivery, learning outcomes, students' engagements, but also very importantly, their health and well-being, and vulnerable groups were affected the most. So all of this really very much exacerbated a pre-existing learning crisis and further deepened inequities in the region. But the crisis did more than that. It also exposed important weaknesses and the overall fragility of education systems. And that then pointed to the need to think further, to not just think about recovery, but also to rethink education and its systems as such, and how to transform them. And we have seen the thinking and the reflections at the regional level and very much at the global level right now through TESS. So consequently, while we need to address importantly the immediate impacts of the pandemic, which is done at country level, it's also supported by regional organizations and international organizations, it's imperative that we do address at the same time the root causes of the learning crises, as well as the inequities in education that very much underline this crisis. So let's take a look at what the education system looked like pre-COVID-19. So an analysis of the progress made in SDG 4, we have data from 2019, shows that while overall progress was made, progress in expanding access and completion of primary and secondary and lower secondary education is very uneven in the region. Some countries progressed a lot, others stagnated, and others regressed. So overall, one can say that a large share of children completed primary education in the past years, but many are yet to complete secondary education, and we have an issue in particular at the upper secondary level. Importantly, by looking across all the targets of SDG 4, there were trends of regression in learning outcomes. So that refers to target 4.1 in terms of achieving minimum proficiency levels in reading and math, and in equity in education, referring to target 4.5 since 2015, meaning we are talking about a long period of a crisis that pre-existed COVID for at least 5 years, if not more. So it also means that when children and adolescents complete a level of education, they may not have acquired the proficiency levels that is intended and required for the particular level in which they are. So a UNESCO report in 2019 showed that despite improved enrollment rates and completion of early grades in half of the region countries, 50% of children were unable to read and understand a simple sentence by age 10. So that's really a translation of the learning crisis that we're talking about. So against this already very severe and serious backdrop, COVID hit. And COVID affected 800 million learners, roughly, probably more in the region, and again, affecting vulnerable children the most. And millions are at risk of not returning to school once they're reopened. We are yet to get the exact figure of how many actually will have dropped out because of COVID. But we must also remember in this context that 128 million children in Asia were already out of school pre-COVID. And this figure represents roughly half of all out-of-school children globally. So we're talking about massive children that are out of school already before, and that will have increased because of COVID. In addition, COVID-related school closures, as well as the inadequate reach and quality of remote learning, have caused important learning loss. Students in developing Asian countries may have lost almost 30% of learning adjusted years of schooling, according to early estimates from the Asian Development Bank. These estimates date of 2021. So in the region, a majority of countries showed between mild or severe loss of learning based on simulated or actually data. We will get more precise data as we go along in collecting them. But for example, in Southeast Asia, Thailand and the Philippines both reported mild to moderate learning losses, while Malaysia and Myanmar show severe learning losses. So we're already starting to get an idea of what we're talking about when we talk about learning loss and what needs to be addressed. So as we still do not know overall the true effect of COVID-19, and it will take years to really have a better understanding of the full impact, not only at the individual level, but for the broader development, prospects, welfare, and economies for the future. So the message is very clear. We need to act urgently to mitigate the impact of the pandemic, and we need to act jointly. So now let us take very quickly a look at what action was undertaken at the global, at the regional level, and also what are countries planning to address the situation. So let me start with the regional level, where the second Asia-Pacific Regional Education Ministers Conference was organized from 5 to 7 June 2022, so this is very recent. So the conference was organized at a critical moment, as most countries in the region had either recently reopened schools or they were planning to do so. And that was a moment when they needed to ensure that all learners returned to school and had a safe learning environment and recovered their lost learning as an immediate and urgent action, while at the same time initiating their rethinking of education and a possible transformation of their education system. So the main outcome of the conference is a commitment of the ministers and education stakeholders of the region. And actually we had about 30 ministers of the region that participated, and quite a number in person. So it was a very strong commitment on behalf of the ministers, but also all the other education stakeholders in two priority areas. The first one is the safe return to school and learning recovery. And the second one is really on addressing and starting with the transformation of education and its systems. But also importantly, through the statement, ministers and stakeholders also committed to strengthen regional cooperation to address common challenges together by, for example, undertaking and developing joint initiatives at bilateral and regional levels. So here, obviously, once again, South-South and triangular cooperation will play an important role. Dr. Ettel, you mentioned the organizations present today, but I really would like to pay tribute to them because they are very important bodies for undertaking South-South and triangular cooperation. So these are obviously the Southeast Asian Ministers and Education Organization, SEAMEO, of which you are the director here, and the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, ASEAN, and we have Roger Chow Jr., who will also speak on behalf of the organization. So they have a long-standing experience in this kind of operation and bringing together countries at sub-regional level to work together towards improved education. And examples of their work will be presented and discussed during the forum at a little bit later point. Also, I just would like to mention the Learning and Education 2030 Plus Networking Group, which is actually the regional mechanism for coordinating the implementation and monitoring of SDG 4 in the region, which has a broad membership and is co-chaired by UNESCO and UNICEF, very importantly, and SEAMEO and ASEAN, for example, are members, but many other regional organizations, NGOs, and other partners are members. Well, and they will play also a key role in following up on these commitments, and also through South-South and triangular cooperation. Now, just lastly, let me refer to the Transforming Education Summit, which, as you all know, will actually start this week, and which is convened by the UN Secretary General. It's a very important event, and it has really brought the need to address the global crisis in education to the top of the global political agenda. So that's a key achievement. And it will present, and this is, I think, for all of us very important to listen to, will bring forward solutions to how to recover learning and initiate the transformation process. And very importantly, I think this is even the most important part of it, it will have mobilized political will as heads of states will present their national commitment statements at the summit. So in conclusion, the challenges the world is facing today cannot be addressed alone. So therefore, South-South and triangular collaboration will become more important than ever to support countries in taking action on their commitment. And this cannot be done alone. So therefore, the international community is also called upon to step up its support and to act jointly to achieve this goal. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ms. Margaret. And to all of you, welcome once again to the Global South-South Development Expo 2022. And our focus for this afternoon's forum is accelerating the learning recovery and transforming education in Southeast Asia through multi-stakeholder partnership. So we're very happy to see you all. And thank you, Margaret, for walking us through on where we are at present in the region. And at this point, we will be listening to some models or completed partnership programs, or some are still ongoing, but we call them as successful South-South triangular cooperation solutions for education transformation. So the focus will be on equity and inclusion, technology and digital transformation, and learning assessment. These are really what we have prioritized to come up to the post-COVID transformation. For equity and inclusion, we're lucky to have with us ASEAN Secretariat and the advisor of the Office of Permanent Secretary for Education, Ministry of Education in Thailand, the Senior Advisor, Dr. Duria Amatavivat, and from ASEAN Secretariat, the Deputy Director and Head of the Education, Youth and Sports Department, Dr. Roger Chow Jr. So for Dr. Chow, we have known him for being an international education development expert, and he has worked with UNESCO and UNICEF, the European Commission, in lifelong learning, in higher education, and also in comparative and international education. And we have known Kunduria, who we call fondly as our dear friend from UNICEF, UNESCO, and SEAMEO. She served as Deputy Permanent Secretary for Education and Foreign Affairs. And also, she's involved in many of our flagship programs and activities at SEAMEO, and also overseeing and shepherding some of our SEAMEO centers in Thailand. And as the former director of the Bureau of International Cooperation, she is also the permanent delegate of Thailand to UNESCO. So I would like to call on stage to share equity and inclusion in ASEAN, Dr. Roger Chow Jr. and Ms. Duria Amatavivat. Dr. Roger and Kunduria, the floor is yours now.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ethel. Thank you very much, Margaret, for framing this particular forum, thematic session. Since 1967, when ASEAN was established, it has grown from 5 ASEAN member states to its current 10 ASEAN member states. However, it has also moved towards building an ASEAN community, where it envisions to have the ASEAN community to be a politically cohesive, economically integrated, and socially responsible community, which includes ensuring fundamental freedoms, human rights, and better lives for all ASEAN people. And of course, strengthening the capacity to deal with existing and emerging challenges. Now, as this is a forum focused on inclusion and equity, we would like to highlight that the Association of Southeast Asian Nations has been joining the global community in terms of its commitment for inclusion and equity, including education. These are seen by the various political declarations and policy documents on hand, which includes the Bali Declaration on the enhancement of the role and participation of persons with disabilities in ASEAN community, the ASEAN Human Rights Declaration, the ASEAN Enabling Master Plan 2025, which focus on mainstreaming the rights of persons with disabilities, the various components, which includes inclusion and equity on the ASEAN Declaration on Human Resource Development for a Changing World of Work, and the ongoing development of the ASEAN Declaration on Digital Transformation of Education Systems in ASEAN. Take note that all ASEAN member states have ratified the UN Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. In 2016, the ASEAN Declaration on Strengthening Education for Out-of-School Children and Youth was adopted. And as such, the establishment of the ASEAN Working Group on Out-of-School Children and Youth, which our friend, Ms. Doria, is actually co-chairing, and she will present on that later on. Now, furthermore, UNICEF, IPRO, and ASEAN has supported Cambodia in developing the Reopen, Recover, and Resilience in Education guidelines for ASEAN countries. This was a collaborative effort to look into developing medium and long-term solutions and recommendations, and of course, strategies to address the learning crisis and to enhance recovery and build resilience in education. These recommendations include emphasizing the equity principle and inclusion of the most vulnerable and marginalized population in all strategies, prioritizing pre-primary education and early learning with a holistic support for young children, ensuring the return to learning and well-being for all children, including out-of-school children and youth, and making learning recovery an urgent priority, as well as building capacity in teaching across all levels of education. And last but not the least, strengthening the education system resilience to cope with future shocks and disruption. And before I forget, ensuring advocacy at the highest political level. These are just some of the recommendations on the guidelines. And I encourage each and every one of you to look into the guidelines. And furthermore, the ASEAN member states are now utilizing the tools for self-assessments as a basis for developing technical assistance and capacity building, which will be developed and delivered through South-South collaboration with all the organizations present here today. With that, I pass on the floor to our colleague, Ms. Doria.
Dear Dr. Etel, Margaret, and Dr. Roger Shaw, distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen. First, I would like to thank UNESCO for inviting me to share some of the good practices in Southeast Asian region, which some of them Dr. Roger Shaw just mentioned, in terms of promoting equality, equitable, and inclusive education. So as we have the practice on the under the what we call the ASEAN Declaration on Strengthening Education for Out-of-School Children and Youth, or in short, we call USCI Declaration. So on behalf of the working group, we have the working group to implement the declaration. So on behalf of the ASEAN Working Group on the USCI, I would like to take this opportunity to thank first to UNESCO, Bangkok, UNICEF, ASEAN, and SEAMEO for making this declaration happen in 2016. The declaration was adopted by the head of state of the ASEAN during the summit in 2016. And later, a working group to work on the declaration was set up and had its first meeting to design the action plan on how we could move forward this declaration in February 2019. So right now, I think that the first meeting was done before the COVID, but later we have the second and the third meeting during the COVID time. So therefore, today I'm very pleased to share with you our activities related to the promotion of inclusive education through the USGI Declaration. Following the adoption of the declaration, Thailand organized an ASEAN conference on out-of-school children and youth. That was a kick-off activity, and it was a few months before the COVID-19 pandemic. So the conference was on September 2019. It was held in Bangkok, aiming first to raise the awareness of member states on the out-of-school children and youth, and to provide an opportunity to build and foster partnership, as well as to promote commitments of shared actions and a closer collaboration among stakeholders in ASEAN on this issue. And of course, UNESCO, UNICEF, APRO, SEAMEO, and ASEAN were among our stakeholders during that conference. A workshop to enhance capacity building for data collection and analysis was also organized by Malaysia in 2020. I think it was a little bit before the COVID-19 pandemic. So it was a face-to-face activity, since we believe that the data collection and analysis is the key to locate the out-of-school children and youth. So aside from focusing on solving the issue of out-of-school children and youth, the declaration also contributes toward the achievement of the SDG 4. And to implement this declaration, the ASEAN member states came up with an action plan. And initially, we proposed to have 3 projects. And as I mentioned, the first one is led by Malaysia. It was the project so-called Evidence and Statistical Capacity Enhancement for Out-of-School Children and Youth in ASEAN. The second project is the so-called Development of Equivalency Framework for Inclusive Basic Education within ASEAN member states and at the regional level. So this project was led by the Philippines, but so far this project hasn't started yet. And the third project as well, we haven't started the concrete activities. This project is what we call Common Voice, Advocacy, Communication, and Knowledge Sharing for the Promotion of Inclusive Education and USGI in ASEAN. And this project was led by Thailand. But we haven't so far, have not started. We allocate some money from Thailand to start some of the activities, but so far during the COVID-19, we were waiting for the donor to support this project. However, many regional activities have been suspended, as I mentioned. In terms of Thailand, we were well aware that the COVID-19 pandemic further aggravated the challenge of out-of-school children and youth, not only in ASEAN, but also at the globe. Therefore, we conducted some national online activities as the education sector was among the hardest hit from the COVID-19 pandemic. School closures brought significant disruption to education and caused massive learning gaps among students. On the other hand, the pandemic has forced education to become more agile, flexible, and responsive. often with the help of their digital tools, and given teachers an opportunity to enhance their teaching through teacher training. So during the COVID-19, I think we have done a lot of the teacher training, especially how to introduce the digital into how to adopt the digital into the teaching learning. However, the shift towards digital delivery of education further enhance inequity of education, including due to the differences of socioeconomic status, urban-rural divide, and the digital divide, as well as some of the infrastructure. So from the COVID, I think that what we found out is that we have a high gap in terms of the using the digital as the key tool in delivering, teaching, and learning. So during the school closures, many initiatives such as on-air, online, and on-site delivery methods were implemented to ensure that learning will continue. We developed digital learning programs by adopting the platforms to ensure suitability for the need of the learners. However, we could not deny that online learning affected the learning achievement of many students. And the impact is huge, especially among students who have challenges in getting online resources and full support from parents due to the financial difficulties. And some of the ASEAN member states provided funds and resources to support the students to gain access, more access to required equipment and internet connectivity, including cooperating with the private sectors. Now let me turn to the project that Thailand will be the host under the ASEAN framework on the USKI Declaration. Regarding the proposed project on the Common Voice project, I would like to share with you that this project aims to promote greater awareness and understanding of the importance of the issue of the out-of-school children and youth among decision makers, stakeholders, and citizens in ASEAN. And of course, we designed this project before the COVID-19. So right now, we are reviewing on how to propose this project to make it in line with the situation. But anyway, the project highlights three key activities, namely the develop and publish the material, advocacy materials on the inclusive education, and identify what would like to have the ambassador to lead advocacy activities in their respective countries. And although Thailand plans to utilize some of the budget that we have, but we cannot, fulfill the project right now. But hopefully we will be able to find some of the partners to support this project. And this project was proposed due to the importance of learning and education and learning, and the fact that access to education for all children and youth remain a significant challenge. So I think that during the school closures, we have seen many initiatives that many of the ASEAN member states have done. And in June this year, just recently, the third working group meeting was held virtually to provide an opportunity for member states to share on their practices in promoting students back to school safely, and some interventions that they were doing during the COVID pandemic to decrease the out-of-school children in the region. And of course, during the working group meeting, our partners such as the UNICEF April, UNESCO Bangkok, SEAMEO Secretariat and some of the civil society members were also invited to share their views on further cooperation and provide several recommendations as possible ways in mapping and monitoring research flexible learning program management. In the future, a regional conference on USCI will be conducted. This is our plan, as Thailand is the co-chair of the working group. So we hope that we will organize a regional conference on the USCI very soon to discuss on the how we can address the issues and work on some priorities in the region to develop innovative solutions to address the challenges of USCI. And I would like to inform that next month in October 11, 12, the summit meeting and the ASET is the ministerial meeting of the ASEAN will of course be presented with the detail of this USCI. So I believe that after the meeting, Thailand will be able to have a regional conference on how we can push forward the implementation of this declaration. So lastly, I believe that all children from whatever background, no matter what challenges they face, deserve a safe environment where they can learn. And nothing is more important than safeguarding children and investing in this policy. Thank you very much for your kind attention.
Thank you very much, Dr. Roger Chow and Kunduria, for a very comprehensive presentation on access, equity, and inclusion in Southeast Asia. So we have seen that ministers have adopted regional policies to support access and inclusive education, and that includes also declaration and 3 program areas for out-of-school children, and also in partnership with other stakeholders in education. So it's not just policy making, but also commitment to different action areas. Thank you so much. And also highlighting the work that Thailand is currently doing and hosting a lot of meetings on this over the last 2 years. And let me go to another very interesting part of this discussion. It's on technology transformation. So even before the pandemic, we already did some projects on ICT and digital transformation and master plans on ICTs. And UNESCO Bangkok Office Program Officer, Mr. Towandang, will be leading us through on the presentation of all the work on ICT, competency standards for teachers, and the like. So Mr. Towan, the floor is yours, please.
Thank you, Ethel. Can you see my presentation?
Yes, we can see clearly.
Yes.
Go ahead, please.
Okay, thank you. So warm greetings to the participants in today's forum and to all my fellow speakers. My name is Tuan Dang, and today I'm here to talk to you about how South-South cooperation can support countries in the development of ICT competencies for teachers and scale that more quickly and efficiently so the education system has the required competencies to support digital, remote, and blended learning. Now, as many of you are aware, the digital transformation arrived in a big way during the pandemic. It really revealed how digital technologies can make the world more interconnected and interdependent more than ever before. But it also showed us that the transformation from the traditional classroom to the online environment really will require a tremendous amount of commitment, time, and work. And 3 aspects that the UN Secretary General highlighted are the need for investments in teachers, digital learning, and systems fit for the future. Now, teacher development was already important before the pandemic, as there was a lack in the number of quality teachers, outdated pedagogy, and skills to meet today's education needs. However, this need for transforming teaching has been magnified. If we are to have successful learning recovery and true transformation with technology. Teachers need to be supported in using technology effectively both inside and outside the classroom, and to adapt to the complex challenges of delivering digital learning. And in this regard, member states in the Asia Pacific identified key priority actions in the Bangkok statement that Margaret had mentioned earlier. This includes reviewing and reforming teaching standards and competency frameworks, investing in providing training, and lastly, ensuring the adequate structures for teachers' development. So let's take a step back and look at how countries can develop frameworks and standards to support the competencies development of teachers. In 2018, UNESCO launched version 3 of its ICT competency framework for teachers. This covers 6 major education areas, including understanding the context of policies for ICT, appropriate ICT pedagogy, and skills for teachers' professional development. It also incorporates various principles to ensure that teachers are using technology in ways that ensure equality, non-discrimination, open and equitable access, and gender equality. These are critical skills to closing the digital divide. Furthermore, the latest version also addresses technological advancements such as AI, the Internet of Things, and open educational resources. So this is really a comprehensive framework in terms of using technology, but also for future forward-looking technologies. The framework also serves as a guidance tool for pre-service and in-service education to help teachers to integrate ICT into the classroom. For example, this can ensure that training can cover the necessary digital competencies in the short term, meanwhile institutionalizing the development of teachers' digital competencies in teacher education and ongoing professional development. So the support for development and implementation of these standards has been a key focus of UNESCO over the last decade, with the support from various governments, including Korea and Japan, and partners including UNICEF and SEAMEO. This project was built up through several phases, and up to date, we've supported 8 countries in reforming the teacher development to integrate ICT competencies. And during this time, we were able to develop a model where we could work together and collectively develop the capacities of the countries to overcome their common challenges. And in the rest of this presentation, I'll describe how we were able to support them to more quickly and efficiently develop the implementation of the competency standards and the curricula. So the project starts with conducting capacity development with key partners, such as the Ministries of Education, teacher education institutes, and relevant stakeholders to support the development of the ICT competency standards. These workshops focus on building their understanding of the framework and, importantly, to advise them through the drafting of the standards, the curricula, and the modules. The multiple phases of the project allowed the project to build expertise in each country that we worked with, and then share those insights and experiences with the new countries. But at the same time, we also engaged past participants to mentor the new countries as they engaged in the new process. Thus, we were able to build a network of technical experts in this very specific domain of teacher ICT development. And a key element to managing this knowledge was the development of an online guideline. The online guideline for competency-based teacher training replicates the capacity building process, and it also provides step-by-step guidance to countries who want to develop the ICT competency standards. It compiles the various approaches, tools, and templates from the countries, and then was continuously refined as the project progressed. And so through this resource, the countries were able to leverage the good practices and the practical examples and tools from previous countries. This served as a valuable reference for other governments and institutions as they engaged in the process of the ICT competency framework. And lastly, the project held various regional symposiums, conferences, and annual project meetings on teacher ICT development. These provided opportunities for the countries to engage in targeted learning exchanges, to share their approaches, questions, and discuss emerging issues as they went through the process. One particularly valuable event was the Regional Transforming Teacher Development Conference in 2019, where we allowed the countries to meet in person to share and discuss their implementations. On the right of this slide, you'll see an example from Bhutan, where experts from each country were engaged to share their insights about their standards and curricula and how they were implementing it in their countries. So as a result of this model, one example of success and concrete outcomes was in the Philippines, which was conducted in close partnership with SEAMEO. Philippines was one of the initial pilot countries where it created a methodology for developing the ICT competency standards based on the UNESCO's framework. In the later stages, it continued to roll out teacher training and developing assessment guidelines for teachers' competencies. The ICT CST has now been integrated into the professional standards for teachers, and the ICT competency courses are now integrated into pre-service teacher training curriculum, which are a requirement for all graduating student teachers. The Philippines has also become one of the main examples in the process of developing the ICT competency standards and is used as a reference point for later countries. And they also serve as key resource persons in our workshops and meetings. Now, in conclusion, I'd first like to reemphasize the urgency or the development of teachers' ICT competencies, which has been identified at both the global and regional levels. In the short term, we must support simple and practical skills development for teachers so that they can support the learning recovery with technology. But we must also ensure that in the medium and long term, there are structural changes, and this must be supported by reformed policies and standards. In the project that I shared, while South-South cooperation was not originally envisioned as a main objective, it proved to be an effective model to support the institutions and the partners to rapidly develop their capacities and to address the challenges of teacher ICT development. And as we turn towards the learning recovery and transforming of education, we see that this type of cooperation is a critical mechanism to support countries who wish to use technology and integrate it into their education systems. And therefore, we urge increased support by member states and partners to strengthen South-South cooperation for teacher ICT development. So with that, thank you so much. And I pass it back to you, as chair.
Thank you very much, Toan. So you see that in digital transformation, it's really a lot of work, from convincing policymakers to revise and update the curriculum and integrate ICT competencies within the curriculum. You also need to do capacity building for teachers and monitoring and evaluation. So there are a lot of successful stories about these ICT competency standards. And then we move on also with the survey on Digital Kids Asia Pacific, where we also measured the competencies of learners. That was during the pandemic, right, Toan? So it will be another presentation perhaps in another time. But now, given the limitation of time, I would like to invite you all to listen to another good case of partnership and cooperation on learning assessment at grade 5 level. So I would like to request Alejandro. Mr. Alejandro Ibanez is our CPLM, Southeast Asia Primary Learning Metrics Project Manager. And we have also Erin, Miss Erin, because this is co-funded also by UNICEF and ASEAN Korea Cooperation Fund. There's so many stakeholders involved. And let me pass the presentation to Ali, please.
Thank you, Dr. Ethel. Good afternoon, everyone. I am pleased to present to you the Southeast Asia Primary Learning Metrics, or what we fondly call CPLM. This is a clear example of how South-South cooperation can further and advance our work, especially in monitoring education quality in the region. Next slide, please. So just very quickly, just to introduce to you what CPLM is all about. We have our tagline. It's called Buy-in for Southeast Asian countries. Buy because it is made by Southeast Asian countries who are bonded together to ensure that we monitor and monitor and learn outcomes through effective monitoring system in the region. For, because it serves the education system by emphasizing the need to learn together and collectively address the gaps in basic education in policy and practice. So combined, Southeast Asia Primary Learning Metrics, or what we call CPLM, is a regional learning assessment and capacity building program designed to monitor education quality and also ultimately improve relevant and equitable learning outcomes. To strengthen regional cohesion and solidarity, CPLM provides systematic opportunities for participating countries in Southeast Asia to closely collaborate in several aspects, such as regional standards for learning, building technical activities, developing robust regional instruments, and setting several rounds of assessments. These processes allow us or allow countries to better understand common problems, shared understanding in improving assessment, learning, and equity in basic education. So for CPLM, to sustain the gains that we had in the first round of assessment in 2019, we were able to formulate the most effective model that can use to be able to advance our efforts in continuing monitoring education quality even in a post-pandemic era. So we have the three pillars, pillar 1, 2, and 3. For the first pillar, our goal in CPLM is to generate comparative data, indicators, and analysis on learning outcomes and context. This pillar serves as our flagship project, which is in charge of developing quality, valid, and reliable learning instruments to ensure that we measure the proficiency and competencies of grade 5 students. For pillar 2, this pillar is in charge of strengthening collaboration and exchange among participating countries. So we are not just after collecting data and processing them, but rather we here in CPLM, we engage countries by modalities of capacity building and other technical assistance to ensure that we use the data in order to influence policy and programs. And lastly, here in CPLM, we promote and improve technical capacity and the use of evidence. So by looking at powerful insights from learning evidence, we should be able to formulate effective policymaking and programs that will translate into improved learning outcomes in basic education in the region. Next slide, please. So CPLM was a collaborative practice from the technical design of assessment, political commitment of countries, and ensuring building regional ownership between and among countries. So the CPLM 2019 assessment was a success by engaging 6 Southeast Asian countries, collecting data from almost 30,000 statistically sampled grade 5 students, representing millions of students in the region. Our methodology is hinged on a technical design that is the most appropriate and superior by administering a paper pencil assessment in reading, writing, mathematics, and global citizenship. So aside from cognitive assessments, there's also a contextual questionnaire administered to students, teachers, schools, and parents. And the tools are translated into 9 national languages, representing mother tongue-based education in Southeast Asia. So CPLM proudly makes our public data sets and technical reports available for public consumption, which are all available in our website. CPLM methodology resulted to creating our own insights in ensuring that our efforts in measuring learning outcomes is aligned with SDG 4.1.1. So this slide shows us some insights into the learning crisis across 6 ASEAN member countries. As part of the CPLM program, a set of learning progressions were developed, which describe what children could do at different levels of their learning development. This slide here shows us a simplified version of the reading progression for CPLM. This is based on actual students' responses. Proficiencies were grouped into 5 levels for reading. This provided us with an important insight into what proportion of students across member CPLM countries are performing at what level. So in this case, you can see that 29% of students perform in the highest level, while approximately 1 in 5 students performed in the lowest level. By developing these proficiency scales, we are also able to map students' performance against the SDG benchmarks. We found that level 6 aligned with end of primary expectations, and level 2 aligned with expectations for the end of lower primary. What this tells us is that approximately 7 out of 10 children are not meeting the minimum reading expectations for the end of primary, and importantly, that 1 in 5 children are not yet at the standard of early primary, even by the time they have completed 5 years of schooling. So as a result of our experience in the first round of assessment in 2019, we were able to develop a wide range knowledge products that ranges from technical reports to policy notes, which informs our ministries in education on the gaps and challenges experienced in basic education. CPLM engages into knowledge management by producing technical reports and other knowledge products, which highlights insights from data, trends, results that inform program and policies in basic education. Evident with our published policy notes, we have also conducted policy roundtables that focuses on thematic issues such as gender and learning, low performing readers, and also supporting to teachers. We also engage into continuous policy roundtable discussions in engaging relevant stakeholders in order to create policy conversations circling around issues of learning recovery, bridging equity, and building policy environment to mitigate the learning loss. Next slide, please. So as a result of our efforts from the first round of assessment, we were able to build our policy pointers to build back better. The 6 policy pointers ranges from discussions of providing early learning in disadvantaged contexts, guaranteeing a solid start in primary education, ensuring explicit and progressive learning standards, supporting motivated and experienced teachers, using data, monitoring, and research to achieve better learning environments, and to continue the monitoring of education quality in a post-pandemic world and participate in the next round of assessment, which hopefully will happen in 2024. Regional collaboration and partnership is at the heart of CPLM. The next phase of the CPLM program is steered through a robust synergy and bond between all the stakeholders, such as the SEAMEO Secretariat, UNICEF EPRO, and with the gracious support from the ASEAN Secretariat through the ASEAN Korea Cooperation Fund Secretariat. Southeast Asian Ministers of Education from participating countries will be at the front and center of CPLM, as we will continue to engage the countries and mobilize support to ensure regional ownership and quality from design, implementation, and monitoring of the program. For the second round, we are very much keen in strengthening quality assurance and elevating technical standards. So we invited experts from various parts of the region in order to strengthen technical know-how and the quality of our learning assessment instruments. That's all from me. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ali. So this one is also a big dream for us. We wanted to measure quality of education, but if it's only SEAMEO, perhaps we don't have a lot of funding to do the grade 5 assessment. So we're able to get funding from ASEAN and ASEAN Korean Cooperation Fund and UNICEF, who funded even the first round of assessment since 2019 and gave us a lot of insights on kids' learning and learning outcomes. So if we put our heads and hearts together, we can really see a lot of areas for improving quality of education in the region. And that's why we're all here, we're friends, Margaret and our dear advisor from UNICEF. So maybe you reserve some of your questions and we move on to the next part, which is actually a sort of guided discussion. So we have Ms. Mitsue Yumura. You're very lucky to meet her as the Regional Education Advisor of UNICEF East Asia Pacific Regional Office. she will guide us through in the discussions. So without further ado, she's a very good advisor, and we listen to her in many times. And now would like to pass on to you the discussions.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ethel. Good afternoon, everybody, once again. And thank you so much for prioritizing to come to this forum, to this session. Because as we already heard, education crisis actually started even way before COVID. We also know that the children who didn't even have access to even just go to pre-primary, primary, secondary, tertiary, vocational, were further disadvantaged because of the school closure that was triggered by the COVID. And also the economic crisis that is really on a many number of households at the moment. So we know that the crisis has even become even worse. So in this situation, we are now just looking at ongoing good practices, as we already heard, the different elements looking at the equity, how to support, or how the countries and the networks are supporting those disadvantaged children. And also, we also looked at digital solution, digital technology. This is something almost like a buzzword in every sector, not just in education, but we are really resorting to that solution to make really good progress in education. We also understand that we needed to understand where the children's learnings are. So that's why assessment is so key, so that we can really invest in something that actually works. We can measure, we can see the progress, and we can see what is actually more needed in future. So looking at these elements, I would like to I have two questions, but I wanted to combine in the interest of time and really open up the floor to invite all. Perhaps I think we can ask colleagues to just to maybe use the chat box in terms of questions, but we would like to really invite people to think about what are the other examples that, that can really be shared so that we can even advance, we can accelerate the children's and then young people's learning in this crisis. We cannot go back to the business as usual. We know that. That's why we are here today. And I'm so pleased that the room is so crowded. It's really full of people. So I really would like to see what can be done in order to promote further in terms of successful South-South triangular cooperation, because we are already convinced this is a good way going forward, supporting the countries to share in the regions, sub-regions, so that they can learn, they can teach, really to support the children and younger people's learning. So I would like to see whether there's anybody who would like to share some examples, some ideas, solutions to really stimulate our thinking even further. I see a gentleman at the back. Yes, please. Can you also introduce yourself quickly? Thank you so much.
I'm Omar. I'm from Jordan. I'm the founder
Thank you very much for the intervention. Thank you. I think everybody would certainly agree with me that the word free is, I think it's really a key word, especially when we know that the more children and households, families are really disadvantaged because of the economic crisis. And so trying to alleviate the financial burdens of the learners, children, families, communities, so that they would be better at in terms of enjoying the learning opportunities. And I think the gamification is something that has been the further. And I think in this region, I understand that quite a few countries, including Vietnam, are already going ahead. So hopefully that we can also learn from Vietnam, that Vietnam can also share their experience, like also other countries. Any other thoughts? Any other anything to provoke further our thinking? I know this is a day one of the expo, and I understand there's a lots of information sharing. Thinking about the children's learning. I wonder whether there's also any comments online. I see quite a few, but is there anything that maybe we can look at? But I'm just one more time, just looking around in the room to see whether there is anybody who would like to share some thoughts and then suggestions.
Can I say something?
Yes.
Yes, I'd like to support that, what if? Because in SEAMEO, during the pandemic, SEAMEO is an intergovernmental organization working with the Ministries of Education. We also did a lot of free, like open educational resources. And during the pandemic, we asked universities, open universities, and others, and private and public institutions to share for free their programs, their games, everything. They were served for free. And in that sense, we were able to reach over 2 million teachers, and they have learned a lot on weekly webinars, how to do this and that. So it's really helping one another. And I think that's the way forward, that, whatever innovations or tools that we have, if we share it with others, then it's the best thing we can do. That's why, even if we are SEAMEO, Southeast Asia, if you look at our webinars, we have those outside of Southeast Asia. We have from Africa, we have from Middle East. So this is the way forward, I think. And thank you for bringing that example. Yeah.
Science is science, whatever you do. So if we have really good quality math content from any country in the world, it can benefit anyone. It's a huge opportunity that we can utilize the technology that we have right now to distribute more. Imagine that. And of course, what are they doing on their phone? They're playing games, they're watching useless videos. We can utilize this. If we put the right gamified content in front of those kids, they will learn. A child in any country in Africa, in Asia, might be learning 4 or 5 languages before he's 12 years old. This is something we can do right now, guys. The technology enables it. We can do it. It's just, there are a lot of content everywhere. It's scattered all over the internet. Maybe we need to consolidate it in one database and have it open source for everyone to use. I'm just brainstorming here. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And I believe there are also a lot of initiatives who are actually going that direction. And if I may, I can also speak about the initiative at the global level that has been also translated at the country level, which is called the Learning Passport. And it's essentially, it's open source for learners, for the partner organizations, the government, anybody. And it's actually in the region. And I'm looking at my colleague, Erin, who can maybe speak a little bit, especially the specific countries. Erin, do you want to just say a few things on Learning Passport?
Yeah, thanks, Mitsui. And I think we definitely share your sentiment that there's a lot of potential for the digital learning, and we have a lot of opportunities now. Learning Passport is one approach we're using, although we're using many in different countries. And Learning Passport is essentially a learning platform. It's a partnership between Microsoft and UNICEF. And this is something that we're now taking offline. And so UNICEF's future endeavor is really to make all of the benefits of the digital learning platform available to offline to the children who don't yet have connectivity or strong enough connectivity in the most remote part of the region. So now we have 5 countries participating in that initiative, and we'll see how it goes. And we're learning still. I think one big lesson we all should take is that we have to monitor very closely the impacts of these digital learning initiatives, whether they're small scale or large scale, because I think we need to learn together how we can best maximize the potential without creating unintended consequences as well for the digital learning. So I encourage all of us, as we're working on expanding our digital learning, to really build in strong monitoring frameworks within our work. And that's what we're also trying to do in UNICEF and in IBRO. So I'm not sure if that helps, but we're happy to share more information as we go forward.
So actually, I'm not necessarily talking further about Learning Passport, but really going back to the 3 presentations that the colleagues have made in terms of how to get to the unreached population, the most disadvantaged children, how we can make sure that those children who were already lagged behind actually have further opportunities, because pandemic, let's face it, it's a crisis, but also we needed to turn it into opportunity. And that's what we are trying to do with the technology, right? And then also making sure that we do monitor. We are not just dumping something into the platform and assuming that the children will learn. No, we have a responsibility, shared responsibility, that we wanted to make sure that the children actually engage, investing their precious time, investing also the resources that they are learning. So that's why it's really important to also looking at that assessment. So I think the digital divide is also another buzzword that we've already, we keep hearing, right? And that's exactly what we're trying to do when Erin talked about like offline. And that's something that I really invite all of us to really think about what we can do, because in each country, the most disadvantaged children have a different characteristics. Sometimes it's a rural area, sometimes it's a location, sometimes it's a language issue, sometimes it's a disability, sometimes it's a humanitarian crisis. So we can certainly share more in terms of what has worked, but also what hasn't worked, so that other countries don't necessarily repeat making the same mistake. So with that note, I think I would like to now pass over the floor over to our Madam Co-Chair, Dr. Ethel. But I don't think I needed to wrap up because it's been already focused discussion. So yeah, Dr. Ethel, over back to you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Mitsui. I have seen a lot of raised hands and questions. And I saw just far from the distance that there's question on technology for teaching and learning in the Philippines, where I actually co-implemented with UNESCO. So what is important there is you were able to do it and integrate the ICT in education in the curriculum. And therefore, all teachers graduating from 2018, 2019, 2020 would have ICT in education as a core subject. And I think that is really more sustainable, no? Rather than training, separate training, it should be well placed within the curriculum and teacher training programs of the countries. And I know there is a lot of things that we can talk and we will never end this day. But if you have some solutions, and if you have some suggestions for us to consider here, we're the partners, we would be glad to have you email us. And so we can discuss and get in touch with you further. Let us not stop here, but let us make this day as the start of our collaboration. So we would be happy to see you again, either in another follow-up session or another follow-up meeting after this one. And with the current context and landscape given by Margaret and the Bangkok statement and all the declarations that are now in place, we should not waste time. We should already act. And that is the most important. And not to act alone and fly alone. We have each other. So let's do it side by side with one another, Southeast Asia and South Asia and other regions of the world. And I think I'm really happy that you come here, and maybe this is the purpose why you're here. Continue emailing us and sending us your solutions and your thoughts, because together we can transform education. So at this point, I would like to thank everyone, and my co-chair, Margaret, would you like to say anything before we fly? I think it's raining and the thunder is coming. Okay, Margaret.
No, I thank you very much. I mean, thank you, everyone. I think this is the beginning of a conversation. And I think what you said, I would like to underscore it once again. Only together can we really tackle this enormous challenge that we have in front of us. And as the gentleman from Jordan said, there's a lot of knowledge out there, but let's really hear about it. Let's collect it. Let's also, share this. At the same time, Mitsuha mentioned it, and then you confirmed it. We need to also standardize. We need to make sure that what is put out there is safe for our children, and that it needs the purposes and the needs of every single country. But I think we do have a lot of experience. That is something that we've learned through the pandemic. So let's just build on what we learned, and also the lessons of what didn't work, as you said. So thank you again, everyone. Let's continue the conversation.
Thank you so much for coming. Have a safe way back home. And I know there are still some sessions. Please continue to attend. And see you next time. Goodbye. Thank you for those who joined us online. Bye.